We've all been there. Your nightstand is stacked with leather-bound copies of Marcus Aurelius. Your social feed is an endless scroll of monochrome statues, and you can quote the Enchiridion by heart. In the quiet of your room, you feel invincible. You feel like you've mastered the ancient art of indifference, until the world actually shows up. The moment someone cuts you off in traffic, or a co-worker sends that biting, passive-aggressive email, the inner citadel doesn't just shake, it crumbles. Suddenly the sage-like calm evaporates, replaced by the same old heat of frustration and the sting of wounded pride. If your stoicism feels like a heavy suit of armor that falls off the moment you actually need to move, you're likely making the one mistake that turns a life-changing philosophy into a mere hobby. Many of us are falling into the trap of intellectual vanity. We mistake the map for the journey. We collect the what of stoicism, the quotes, the history, the terminology, while completely ignoring the how. We treat philosophy like a museum exhibit rather than a toolkit. Real stoicism isn't found in a quiet library. It's forged in the chaos of a Tuesday afternoon. Before we dive into exactly how to bridge the gap between reading the words and living them, hit that subscribe button. Join our community of modern practitioners dedicated to building true, unbreakable mental resilience, one day at a time. Let's stop reading about the good life and start practicing it. The most common mistake in modern stoicism, and perhaps the most dangerous one, is confusing intellectual consumption with character transformation. We live in an era of information abundance. We can download the wisdom of the Roman Empire for $9.99 or watch a 5-minute summary of Seneca's letters while eating lunch. But this accessibility has created a secondary phenomenon, the information trap. Many practitioners treat Stoicism like a history project or a curated collection of life hacks designed to make them feel more productive. They buy the linen-bound journals, follow the Stoic aesthetic accounts on Instagram, and can recite the 3 disciplines of Epictetus on command. Yet, when the pressure of real life is applied, they fail to bridge the gap between the page and the pavement. The comfort of the information trap. Why do we do this? Because reading is safe. When you sit in your favourite chair reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, you are in a controlled environment. You're in a state of intellectual agreement with the text. It feels good to agree with the idea that the impediment to action advances action. Your brain releases dopamine as if you've actually accomplished something virtuous, simply because you understood the concept of virtue. This is what psychologists call passive learning. It feels like progress, but it is actually a form of sophisticated procrastination. The information trap allows you to play the role of a philosopher without ever having to step into the arena. It permits you to feel superior to your emotions in theory, while remaining a slave to them in practice. You become a library stoic, someone who is incredibly well versed in the terminology of resilience, but remains brittle in the face of actual adversity. The technical versus the moral, a fatal confusion. In the modern world, we are trained to treat knowledge as a commodity. If you want to learn how to code, you study syntax. If you want to learn history, you memorize dates. We attempt to apply this same technical knowledge model to Stoicism. We think that if we just read one more book or listen to one more podcast, we will finally have Stoicism. But Stoicism isn't technical knowledge, it is moral knowledge. Technical knowledge is external. You can look it up in a book. Moral knowledge is internal. It only exists when it is being lived. If you know the definition of equanimity but you scream at a service worker because your order is wrong, you do not actually know equanimity. You have merely memorized a dictionary entry. In the Stoic view, to know the good is to do the good. If you aren't doing it, you haven't learned it yet. The challenge, the fragility of fair-weather philosophy. The true challenge of this practice is that the work of Stoicism only begins when the comfort ends. Reading about symmetry doddles, balance, and proxeros, having your principles at hand, is easy when your bank account is full, your health is perfect, and your relationships are stable. However, the Stoic school was not founded for the fair-weather practitioner. It was a philosophy born out of exile, war, plague, and political collapse. Its purpose was to provide an internal compass when the external world became unrecognizable. If you're only Stoic when things are going well, you aren't practicing Stoicism, you're just enjoying a good mood. True practice is the gap. Between every event and our reaction, there is a space. For the library Stoic, that space is filled with reflexive habit, ego, and panic. For the embodied Stoic, that space is filled with the conscious application of reason. The challenge is that this gap is usually measured in milliseconds. You cannot consult a book in those milliseconds. You cannot look up a quote on your phone. You must be the philosophy. The map is not the territory. Consider a map of a dangerous mountain range. You can spend years studying the map. You can memorize every peak, every valley, and every potential shortcut. You can even teach others how to read the map. But the moment you actually step onto that mountain, the map stays in your pocket. You are now dealing with the wind, the thinning air, the loose gravel, and the physical exhaustion. The library Stoic spends their whole life looking at the map, convinced they are a mountaineer. But the embodied Stoic understands that the map is useless if you don't have the muscle and the lung capacity to actually climb, bridging the gap. From consumption to callous, to move from the page to the pavement, we have to stop treating Stoicism as a series of ideas to be contemplated and start treating it as a series of experiments to be conducted. 1. Voluntary hardship. If you read about being indifferent to cold, but you never take a cold shower or walk outside without a jacket in autumn, you are just a theorist. You must build the physical callus of the mind. 2. The preach-practice audit. Ask yourself, if I were stripped of my books and my internet access today, how much Stoicism would actually be left in my behaviour? 3. Real-time reflection. The Stoics used journaling not just to record thoughts, but to perform a post-game analysis of their actions. Did you actually use justice to win that argument? Did you apply temperance at dinner? The stakes of this mistake. The reason this mistake is so critical is that it leads to a false sense of security. When a real crisis hits, a job loss, a death in the family, a health scare, the library Stoic is devastated. They feel like the philosophy failed them. They think, I read all the books, why do I feel so much pain? The philosophy didn't fail. The practitioner failed to move the philosophy from the library of the mind into the muscle of the soul. They brought a map to a rock climb and then wondered why the map didn't pull them up the cliff. Stoicism is a contact sport. It requires you to get your hands dirty in the messy, frustrating, and often unfair reality of human existence. It is not a way to avoid the world, but a way to engage with it more effectively. Until you take the wisdom off the shelf and put it into your choices, you are just a collector of ancient ideas. Stop collecting. Start becoming. The preach versus practice gap. To truly understand the preach versus practice gap, we have to look at the ancient Stoa not as a university classroom, but as a wrestling pit. The Greeks used the word askesis, from which we get ascetic, but it literally meant training or exercise. To the ancients, a philosopher who couldn't handle a setback was as ridiculous as a weightlifter who couldn't lift a grocery bag. Epictetus, the slave-turned-teacher, was notorious for his bluntness on this topic. He would often tell his students that he didn't care if they could pass the logic of a syllogism. He wanted to see how they acted when they were sick, when they were in danger, and when they were being insulted. He famously said, "Show me your shoulders." He didn't want to see their books. He wanted to see the muscle they had built through moral struggle. When we fail to treat Stoicism as a gym for the soul, we fall into 3 psychological traps that don't just stall our progress, they actively damage our character. 1. Performative Stoicism, the mask of the sage. In the digital age, Stoicism has become cool. It's associated with high-performance CEOs, elite athletes, and a certain aesthetic of rugged, silent strength. This has birthed performative Stoicism. This pitfall occurs when we use the language of the ancients to curate an image rather than to cultivate a soul. We post quotes about Amor Fati Dololas, a love of fate, while secretly fuming that our post didn't get enough likes. We use the philosophy as a costume. We want the world to see us as someone who is unshakable, which ironically makes us entirely dependent on the world's opinion of us. The danger here is cognitive dissonance. When you project an image of calm that doesn't match your internal reality, you create a deep sense of fraudulence. You aren't practicing honesty or justice, you are practicing marketing. Performative Stoicism is the ultimate ego trip, using a philosophy designed to dismantle the ego to actually feed it. You aren't becoming a sage, you're just becoming a statue. Impressive to look at, but hollow and cold on the inside. 2. Emotional suppression. The stone man. Fallacy. Perhaps the most destructive mistake is the confusion between being Stoic, the philosophy, and being Stoic, the lowercase adjective meaning unfeeling. Many modern practitioners fall into the trap of emotional suppression. They believe that to be a good Stoic, they must kill their heart. They view every emotion, grief, joy, anger, fear, as a sign of failure. So when they feel a surge of panic or a wave of sadness, they don't process it, they crush it. They shove it into a dark corner of their mind and put a bust of Seneca on top of the trapdoor. This is not Stoicism. It is psychological suicide. The Stoics distinguish between propatheia, initial, involuntary emotional flashes, and actual passions. A true Stoic feels the flash, the racing heart, the sting of a tear, but they use reason to decide whether to give that emotion their assent. Suppression leads to a bottled-up existence where tension simmers beneath the surface. Eventually the pressure becomes too high, and the practitioner snaps, usually over something trivial. Genuine clarity comes from transformation, not suppression. It's about looking at the emotion, understanding the false judgment behind it, and letting it dissolve through logic, not burying it alive. 3. The procrastination of virtue, the tomorrow. Sage. The third pitfall is the most subtle, the procrastination of virtue. This is the habit of believing that Stoicism is something we will really start when life gets quieter, or when we finish this one last book, or when our current crisis is over. We tell ourselves, I'll be more disciplined and start my morning routine tomorrow, or I'll practice patience once my kids are older, my boss retires, the economy improves. We treat virtue as a destination we're travelling toward, rather than the vehicle we're currently driving. The Stoics were obsessed with the present moment. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that he could be a good man right now. Virtue isn't a grand heroic act performed on a stage. It is the micro-choice you make when you're tired, and you have the option to be lazy or to be useful. When you procrastinate virtue, you're essentially saying that the external world, the indifference, has more power over your character than you do. You're waiting for the perfect conditions to be a good person. But Stoicism teaches that the conditions are the raw material. To wait for better conditions to practice virtue is like a sculptor waiting for better clay before they learn how to use their hands. The cost of the theory, heavy approach. If you stay in these 3 traps, you will encounter the Stoic burnout. You'll find that after 2 years of reading, you're just as anxious, just as angry, and just as frustrated as you were on day 1. This happens because knowledge is not a shield. You can know the physics of how a punch works, but that won't stop your nose from bleeding if you get hit. To close the preach versus practice gap, you have to stop being a student of the words and start being a student of your own reactions. Bridging the gap. The shoulder. Check. How do we move away from these pitfalls? We must adopt the shoulder check mentality. In every situation, ask, am I doing this for the look of it? Fighting performative stoicism. Am I feeling this, or just hiding it? Fighting suppression. Am I acting now or planning to act later? Fighting procrastination. Stoicism is meant to be a tool that is worn down by use. If your copy of Meditations is pristine but your temper is short, you are doing it wrong. If your journals are full of beautiful prose but your daily life is full of avoided responsibilities, you're still in the lecture hall. The gap is where the life is. It's in the messy, uninstagrammable moments where no one is watching. It's choosing to be kind to a difficult person when you're exhausted. It's choosing to do the hard work when you're bored. It's choosing to accept a loss without whining. Epictetus didn't want to hear his students' speeches. He wanted to see how they lived. We should demand the same of ourselves. The goal isn't to be the person who explains Stoicism the best. It's to be the person who needs to explain it the least because their character speaks for itself. This brings us to the precipice of the entire philosophy. Everything we have discussed, the reading, the journaling, the memorizing of Greek terms, has been leading to this single point. This is the climax, the moment of truth, and the place where 90% of modern practitioners lose their way. Here is the hard truth. A Stoic who doesn't act is just a librarian with a high pain tolerance. You can own the most expensive gold-leafed editions of the classics. You can have Seneca's quotes tattooed on your forearm, but if you cannot perform in the moment of truth, you are not a Stoic. You are a hobbyist. You are someone who likes the idea of being strong but refuses to pick up the weight, the anatomy of the split second. The key moment of Stoicism isn't when you finish meditations. It isn't when you attend a seminar or complete a 30-day challenge. It is the split second between a stimulus and your response. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor whose work echoed Stoic principles, famously noted that in that tiny gap lies our growth and our freedom. In that gap, the moment after the insult is hurled, the moment after the "we need to talk" text arrives, the moment the doctor gives you the bad news, your entire philosophy is tested. If you have all the knowledge in the world but cannot find that tiny gap of time to choose your reaction, your practice is failing you. In that moment, the library of your mind is closed. You cannot flip to page 42 to see what Marcus would do. You are either prepared or you are a victim of your impulses. The illusion of learning. The mistake we make is thinking that understanding a concept is the same as owning it. We are training for a marathon by watching videos of people running. We see the elite runners. We understand their stride, we know their diet, and we can explain the physics of their movement. But when we step onto the pavement, our lungs burn and our legs fail because we have no biological infrastructure for the task. In Stoicism, that infrastructure is what the ancients called procero, having your principles at hand or at the ready. It's like a dagger a soldier keeps on their belt. If the enemy leaps from the shadows and you have to run back to your tent to find your weapon, you are already dead. Most practitioners keep their Stoic dagger in a display case at home. They have the knowledge, but it isn't reactive. It isn't part of their nervous system. Why you fail under pressure? Why does the inner citadel crumble so easily? Because your practice lacks rehearsal. In the military, soldiers don't just read about combat. They participate in live-fire drills. They create stress inoculations. They want the body to know what to do when the mind is screaming in terror. Stoicism was designed to be exactly that. Stress inoculation for the soul. If you only practice when you're calm, you aren't actually practicing, you're just reflecting. To find the gap during a real crisis, you have to have found it 1,000 times during small ones. Did you find the gap when the coffee was cold? Did you find the gap when the Wi-Fi cut out? Did you find the gap when someone was wrong on the internet? If you fail at the low-stakes moments, what makes you think you will succeed when the stakes are high? The moment of truth is a relentless judge. It doesn't care about your intentions or your library. It only cares about your ascent. The climax. The choice of the soul. Imagine the moment. Someone says something that deeply offends you. Your ego flares up. Your chest tightens. Your brain prepares a stinging retort that will put them in their place. This is the climax. In this moment, there are two versions of you. One is the automatic you, the one driven by biology, evolution, and social conditioning. This version is a puppet. The person who insulted you is pulling the strings. The second is the stoic you. This version sees the flare-up, feels the heat, and says, "Wait, this is just an impression. It is not the thing itself." This version realizes that the only thing that can actually hurt you is your own judgment of the event. The climax is the act of severing the strings. It is the refusal to be a puppet. When you find that gap and choose a response based on virtue, justice, temperance, wisdom, courage, rather than impulse, you have finally transitioned from a library stoic to a practitioner. In that 1 second, you have done more for your character than a year of reading could ever accomplish. The tragedy of the untested life. There is a specific kind of tragedy in being a well-read stoic who never changes. It is the tragedy of the eternal student who is afraid to take the exam. We use the books as a shield against life rather than a tool for it. We hide in the words because the actual application, the biting of the tongue, the endurance of the pain, the humble admission of being wrong, is physically and emotionally demanding. If you don't find the gap, your stoicism is just a decorative layer of paint on a rotting fence. It looks good from the street, but it provides no structural integrity. The shift. From thinking to being. To reach the climax of your practice, you must move from the what to the when. The what. I know I should be patient. Theory. The when. I am being tested right now by this person's incompetence, and I will choose silence. Practice. The moment of truth is a gift. Every frustration, every delay, and every insult is a sparring partner, sent by the universe to help you see where your armor is thin. Instead of wishing these moments away, the true Stoic welcomes them. Why? Because you can't show your shoulders in a library. You can only show them in the struggle. The key moment is now, and now, and now. Every second is a fresh opportunity to either be a librarian or a philosopher. The question isn't how many books you've read. The question is, in the split second of choice, who is in charge? If it's not you, then it's time to stop reading and start rehearsing. Stoicism is not a spectator sport. It is a performance art. To fix your practice and escape the information trap, you must stop being a passive observer of your own mind and start being its architect. Knowledge is only the raw material. Your life is the sculpture. If that wisdom isn't being carved into your daily habits, it remains a ghost in the machine, useless and ethereal. To move from library Stoic to a true practitioner, you must turn theory into bone. Here is how you start. Stop reading and start doing. Information has a diminishing return without application. Today, pick exactly one virtue, perhaps temperance or courage, and apply it to a single minor inconvenience. When the coffee is cold or the line is long, let that be your arena. Practice premeditatio malorum with a twist. Don't just think about what could go wrong, that's just worrying. Instead, visualize your virtuous response. See yourself staying calm in the storm. Rehearse the gap before it happens. Embrace the equation. Remember that virtue lasks action. In the Stoic ledger, thoughts that don't lead to a change in behavior are worth zero. Without the lived experience of discipline, the philosophy is just ink on paper and statues on a screen. The goal of Stoicism isn't to explain the world, it's to be someone who can endure it with grace and purpose. Stop being a library Stoic today. I want you to identify one recurring frustration in your life, that one person or situation that always gets under your skin, and commit to meeting it with intentional silence instead of a reflexive complaint. What is the biggest challenge you face when trying to stay Stoic in the real world? Let me know in the comments below. I read every response, and together we can figure out the practical drills to turn your knowledge into an unbreakable character. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on our journey from theory to embodiment.